Have you ever asked yourself how something like speed flying is even possible? How we can fly just centimeters above the ground at high speeds without crashing into the terrain? How do we manage to adjust our glide so precisely to every turn, hill and feature of the slope? Let's start with the basics. Every wing, whether it's a speedwing or a paraglider, has its glide ratio. This depends on several factors such as the wing's internal structure, surface area and wing loading. In general, the larger the wing, the better it glides. Take for example a standard paragliding wing with a flat area of 23 square meters. This wing has excellent glide, which makes proximity flying difficult if not impossible. As soon as you try to get close to the ground, you'll find yourself climbing higher and higher because of the wing's efficiency. The wing is also less responsive, with slower reactions to inputs. Now let's say we use a smaller wing, maybe around 16 square meters. The glide ratio is lower, which means the wing sinks more quickly. The speed increases too, and it becomes much more responsive to brake and weight shift inputs. But even a 16 square meter is still quite large for serious proximity flying. On flat terrain you might get your first taste of low flying, but as soon as the slope gets steeper you'll glide out and away from the terrain again. So how can we still stay down if the wing glides too much? One trick is to roll your wing using wake shift or brake input. Every time you roll or turn, you lose more altitude. Medium-sized wing, it's possible to stay low on flatter slopes by constantly rolling or turning. The steeper the roll and the more brake or weight shift input you give, the more altitude you lose. This makes proximity flying with larger wings difficult. You have to roll constantly to stay low, doing wing overs and turns. And there's little room for errors. Too much input and you risk crashing. Too little and you gain altitude due to its high glide ratio. Once you've been kicked out of the slope, it's very hard to dive back in, and also more dangerous. You need to know your wing perfectly and be able to predict how much altitude you lose with each input. So far, so good. Now you know that it's possible to fly close to the ground with a medium-sized wing, but it's much harder and there's less margin for errors. A little too much brake or roll and you'll hit the terrain. Still, learning this way builds great piloting skills. If you can master proximity flying with larger wings, you'll have much more control when you transition to smaller ones. Let's go even smaller. As we've seen, wing size determines the glide ratio. With very small speed flying wings, you get less glide and therefore more sink. This makes staying low much easier, also on steep terrain. And if you're still gliding too much, you can work your way down with much smaller roll inputs. But there's a trade-off. Smaller wings react faster and are less forgiving. Every input counts. Strong inputs on a small wing will cause you to lose a lot of altitude, possibly more than you intend. And there's more. Most wings have speed system. In the case of speedwings, it's often controlled with trimmers. Opening the trimmers decreases the angle of attack, making the wing fly faster and steeper. This helps you stay close to the ground and adds another tool for adjusting your sink rate. But here comes the big question. How do we avoid crashing into the terrain? If every wing has a fixed glide ratio, what happens when the terrain is too flat and the wing just doesn't glide enough? First, it's crucial to choose the right wing for the terrain, especially for the flattest part of it. If your wing can't even overfly a section of the slope with trimmers closed, then you probably need a larger wing with better glide. But beyond wing choice, you can actively manage your lift and sink. Braking increases the angle of attack, generating lift. So when the terrain flattens or you encounter an uphill section, braking helps you float over it. A more efficient technique is to use the rear risers, especially once the trimmers are open. Do you remember? Opening trimmers increases speed and sink rate. So pulling on the rear risers temporarily reverses that by increasing the glide ratio again, much like closing the trimmers. This gives you more glide when you need it and can help you clear obstacles or flatter terrain, and releasing them will add more sink again. This way you can adjust your sink and lift precisely. In summary, speed flying close to the ground becomes possible when you fly a small enough wing, you use open trimmers to gain speed and sink, you actively control your altitude by rolling or turning to lose altitude, braking or using rear risers to generate lift. Sharper rolling and harder weight shift input gives you more altitude loss. Braking or pulling the rear risers generates lift used to glide better on flatter parts. But the game changed in 2022. That's when a revolution happened in the world of paragliding, the invention of parakites. These wings combine the characteristics of a kite and a paraglider. What used to require brakes and trimmers, with the only option to either pilot through your brakes or rear risers, can now be done entirely through the brakes. This makes the wing more sensitive and harder to control, as every small input matters more, but it also makes proximity speed flying easier than ever. Hands up, more speed and much faster descent, way more than traditional Speedwings. Brakes down, huge lift, far more than normal speed or paragliding wings could generate. You now have a much wider range of glide and sink control, all through a single input system, your brakes. This allows you to fly over extremely flat terrain, which was simply impossible before 2022 with traditional Speedwings. Those older wings could dive, but they didn't have the glide. Now we have both. And that's how we're able to fly so close to the terrain. Crashing into the terrain due to poor glide ratio is a thing of the past if you don't push the absolute limits. Now the challenge is timing your hands up moments correctly and combining them with rolling to maintain the perfect altitude. Which I'm not saying is easier to do than on normal Speedwings, but once you learned how to control parakites the correct way, it's definitely way easier to fly low attached to the ground. Of course, it still remains a choice whether you want to fly parakites or normal Speedwings. This just depends on personal preferences and the terrain you're flying in.
Yeah.